Good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Seaton, and I am a curator at the Mariana Kistler Beach Museum of Art at Kansas State University. Welcome to Let's Talk Art, one in a series of discussions with artists and other creative thinkers about works in the museum's collection. Today, we're fortunate to have with us China Marks, talking about her intriguing work, Monkey Boy and the Magic Beans, which is featured in our current exhibition, Inspirations, Art for Storytelling. All of the images from this exhibition are available as part of an interactive feature on our website. See the Explore Exhibitions section of the website, www.beach.k-state.edu. So this program will last about 30 minutes. If you'd like to pose a question or comment during or after the event, please do so using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen rather than the chat box. Use the Q&A button. I'll read these questions and comments to China Marks after the talk, which will be about 20 minutes. Closed captioning is available for those who want it. Click CC at the bottom of your screen. And this program is being recorded. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Let's begin formally with an acknowledgement that the museum and university stand on the homeland of Native peoples, and that this land was taken from them by violence and broken promises. Now let me introduce our speaker. China Marks is an artist known for her wall-hung and book-form sewn drawings. Mark was born and educated in Kansas City, Missouri, earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in sculpture from the Kansas City Art Institute. A Fulbright Hays Fellowship took her to Kathmandu, Nepal, where she spent 16 months constructing a major installation out of local materials. In 1976, having received a Master of Fine Arts degree in sculpture from Washington University in St. Louis, Marks moved east to make art. Since 1999, she has lived and worked in Long Island City. Her work was featured at the Beach Museum of Art in 2007 in the exhibition, Let Me Show You the World, the Sewn Drawings of China Marks. China, thanks for joining us. We'll just let you turn on your video and unmute. Give you a second.
I don't see myself, but that's okay.
Do you see the work of the hour?
Oh, now I see me. Yes, I see Monkey Boy and the Magic Beans. You know, a funny thing about Monkey Boy and the Magic Beans is that I made it, and shortly afterwards, the Beach Museum acquired it. And I hadn't seen it for years before this program was going to happen. And I was really fascinated to see it again. It's very different from most of what I do and have done. And I think it has to do with the overall pattern. I have no idea where I got that. But what I said about it is that it looks, two things struck me immediately. One is that it's like all my work in that the process informed it totally. I had no idea what this would look like. And when I went back to look at it, there were things I recognized and there were things I had sort of forgotten. It made me think of going to the park to play a game or to walk a dog, and someone else is doing something else in the park and someone else is having a picnic. This drawing has things in it. I can't imagine how they ended up there, but they're perfect. So it's fun to see it again. I said it reminded me of listening to stories told by an eccentric uncle who had candy in his pocket for people who listened all the way through. So that's the kind of drawing Monkey Boy is. And I think it's perfect for the Beach Museum because you can look at it a lot of different times and see different things in it.
That is certainly true. I think our educator is enjoying working with it, with visitors to the version of the exhibition that's now online.
Can we start with the slides? Should we? Yes, thank you. The first thing to know about my work is that I hack machines to draw with them. Next. Next. And I draw with thread. I have a lot of thread in my thread storage unit. This is only part of it. And I have even more now because I just added another 45 to 50 cones of thread to this thread storage unit. So it doesn't even look the same anymore. I'm always looking for a particular color or a particular off color. It used to be that I could get thread almost anywhere because the garment district was shrinking and people would even put thread out on the street next to buildings and I would pick it up. Now it is a little more complicated to get, but I'm still looking for colors I don't have. Next, please. Next. I have thousands of scraps of all kinds. Boxes of fabric also on shelves, but thousands of scraps that I keep on felt sheets that are supported by cardboard, and they are covered with glassine, and they are stacked to the brim in wide flat boxes that they themselves are stacked near the 4 by 8 foot table that I use to compose on. I first compose, then I fuse everything down with an archival fusible. Then I take it to my sewing machines and sew draw everything down. And as soon as I do, that's kind of a truth teller. And I see what works and what doesn't, and I begin to do and undo over long periods of time. Next, please. Another thing to know about my work is that it tells stories. There are always stories in my work, and I don't make them up. They come out of the process of making the drawing. And this one, and the titles come from the process as well. This one's called Say It With Flowers, and you can see that there's a little bird girl as well as a tiger with an artificial leg and mittens, and a strange leopard fellow that's got a kind of a human head but is a little scary. I like these things that are odd and scary or funny and silly at the same time. Say It With Flowers, that's the name of this. Next, please. In 2010, I started adding words to my work. I didn't do it arbitrarily. It's just that I couldn't shut these people up anymore, these characters. They began to talk. So this is a little drawing. It's called The Brush Off. And it's called The Brush Off because of this half frog, half boy is always asking people to be his friend, and nobody will ever do it. Sure, kid, when I get back. But nobody ever gets back to this guy. Didn't you know kids like that when you were young? The loser kids? I might have even been one of them, but.
Maybe all of us were.
But I didn't know because I had a wonderful family and that was friends enough for me. And I really didn't make friends till I got to art school. Next, please. Well, we come back to Monkey Boy so that I can make the point again that I didn't make up Monkey Boy. Monkey Boy emerged from the process of being made. it wasn't magic exactly. It was more, well, actually a lot of hard work, but I wasn't the only person working. I, the machines worked. My hand tools worked. The music I listened to on the radio made a difference. The light coming from my skylights and my windows made a difference. And even the amount of time it took from start to finish, the days and weeks, informed the final look of the drawing. I don't feel, I was part of the process, but I didn't do it all. Next. This is a drawing called Night Traveler. And the Night Traveler is the big goofy guy with the button teeth, who's powerful but very benign. And he takes children on wonderful trips. You might think that this is part of some kind of urban legend, but it just came out of this drawing. And a little girl's nestled inside his mouth. And the little girl's nurse, or Nana, who is a bird with a human face, is rebuking the night traveler for getting her home so late. And he says, last time, and he says, I do what I can, but I'm not in charge. Because this is a drawing and not the real world. In this drawing, children are in control. And the child says, it was my fault. We were exploring the salt caves on Mars, and I lost track of the time. And for me anyway, it seems entirely possible when you see that night sky behind the night traveler, that she could go into that sky and find Mars and explore the salt caves. Next, please. This is another man-animal combination. This stunning creature, stunning, lovely little girl, is at a fancy party and she is spurned. No one goes near her. And she says, if men prefer ordinary girls, then I will have to find another way to amuse myself. But her heart's broken. I'm quite in love with this one. Another thing to say about this drawing is you see the star hanging from her mane or her braid. I found that on the sidewalk a few days before, near where I live and work, a few days before I needed it. And I just popped it right in and it's perfect. Next, please. This is a tiny drawing with two animal people and one not so animal-like. And it's called First Offenders. And the one who looks mostly like a dog, funny little dog, says, why are you two in here? And Mouse Boy says, we laughed in church. How about you? And the dog boy says, I refuse to go fetch, and I'm not sorry. It's a stupid game. Well, I think you can tell from that I'm always on the side of the child. Next, please. Here we are back at Monkey Boy. And one of the other things I can say about it is you see that kind of a clock with numbers up in one corner. It's ticking away the time, and night is impinging all the way around. That time passes invisibly within the drawing and without, maybe in sync, maybe not. The other thing to say is how alive it is. A bird inside his head is pulling something out from one of his eyes. he holds another bird. And then there are the questions that are not answered. What magic do the beans that the woman is offering him, what magic is it? What kind of magic is it? What do those beans do? And what does she want in exchange? These are the kind of questions that anyone looking at it can come up with answers. I don't have the answers. The drawing doesn't say. It stops here.
Do you want to take some questions?
Yes.
I just might start with the image. You are right. There's something to be noticed every time one looks at it. I think you mentioned to me that, well, I was going to mention that the little sort of fairy figure between the woman carrying the beans and then Monkey Boy, I noticed that he had a black eye just today. That was today's thing.
And it's been 13 years. I don't remember why he has a black eye, but I don't need to know.
Yeah, so it interests me that this is, as you described when we were talking earlier, a story without words. And then your decision to incorporate text into your work. What drove that, do you think?
I don't know how to say this, but I've been making these drawings for 18 years. And it took a long time. But at some point, it just, I heard their conversation. I heard comments. It's not something with all of this work, I never do anything I decide to do. It's as if the drawings decided they needed to be heard. And at first, I found words on pieces of fabric. It turns out that I had a lot of letters and words on fabric I already had. And then I got a Pollock Krasner grant in 2013 that gave me the funding to get a computerized embroidery machine and software that would allow me to write files and have the text sewn out. And then I also occasionally I appropriate things that I find. So it's a combination of it, but I don't think I'll ever shut up because they never shut up.
Here's a related question from Catherine Slogic, our educator, senior educator. She says, your work is about stories. What were your favorite stories as a child, or some of them?
Well, I was a big fan of The Wizard of Oz. And in the old-fashioned illustrations for that. And I also inherited my brother's books, lots of big format fairy tales. This is early on, but I was reading at 4, so I soon graduated to more sophisticated material.
A question, well, this is also, I guess, related. It's, have you ever been surprised by someone else's interpretation of any of your works? So of the stories in your works.
Most people, well, occasionally. Most people don't say that much. I mean, they're taken by the work, but they don't necessarily volunteer interpretations. But occasionally I'm surprised. I did a piece, it's on my website. It's called Men in Their Ways. It's really kind of bloody. It's based on a tapestry copy of a 16th century drawing of jousting knights. So it's quite gruesome and bloody. And in the middle of these old-fashioned knights who've been kind of forcibly dragged into the 20th century by what I've done to them and are talking quite profanely to each other about it, is another fellow in the middle with a gun and said, looks like fun, but I prefer my gun. And he's just shot someone dead who's toppling over the hill. And it's become an enormously favorite piece for people, which interests me. They find it hilarious. I find it, that's what men do. And it's not always such a great thing.
I think there's a scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark in which Harrison Ford he's getting ready to be attacked by someone who has knives, and then he just pulls out his gun and shoots this person who looks like he's an expert with a knife. What else do we have here? We have some nice comments from Majka Jankawiak. Sorry if I mispronounced that. I love your images and stories. They tell magical things. And a question about your technique, going back to your technique. This is from Tony Crawford. I missed the connection between the drawings and the thread at the beginning. Why do you call these sewn drawings? China, why did you choose that phrasing?
I think there are a couple of reasons. One is I've drawn all my life. My brother, John, who's 5 years older than I am, his earliest memory of me is I was either drawing or reading. I never thought I would, and I was always interested in the process of drawing. And I started out as a sculptor, but in 91, I think, I pretty much gave up sculpture for drawing. And in 2000, I became convinced that I was repeating myself and it was intolerable. So I decided I would put paper on the wall and I would start drawing, and I would let my drawings tell me what I should do next, because I've always gotten information from my work rather than the other way around. I don't put it in, they give it out to me. And on December 6th of 2000, my drawings told me that they had to be sewn, and it would not be enough for me to hand embroider them. I had to buy a sewing machine and learn how to produce and control a sewn line. So from the beginning for me, and I'd been a sculptor for years, and I had a kind of facility with machines. One of my grandfathers had that, and one of my brothers had it. So it is probably genetic. What it allowed me to do was what happens when you've drawn for years. Your hand gets used to certain kinds of standard things, almost like cliches, your own personal cliches. You draw a foot a certain way. With this work, I don't do that. It gives me a much wider view of what's possible. And if you looked at the versos of my work, and I probably should have shown you a verso, but I haven't. Everything is intensely linear. It's not quilting, it's drawing. There's a kind of linearity to, well, a zigzag stitch is lines. It's just lines. And I think of them as drawings. I guess that's the easiest answer. They're drawings to me. And they have a kind of fluidity and plasticity that's typical of drawing. In some ways they're collage. But the transformative effect is from the drawing into, as I call it.
And you talked with us earlier about what you can do with that line. With the zigzag, you can make it wider or narrower into almost a straight line, right?
Yeah, you can, on its side, it becomes a straight line. You can scumble it.
Yeah, that's the term I was, tell people what you mean by that.
Well, painters know what that means. It's taking a brush, and here we go into another medium. You take a brush and you dip it in paint, and you move the brush around freely, and then you take another color and you scumble over that, and you have a way of eye mixing colors. But you can do it with thread as well.
That's really interesting. You mentioned that you studied sculpture, and I know you also worked in a variety of media, paint and print as a printmaker. Someone here wanted to ask you about your time at the Kansas City Art Institute when you were training. And it's Emma Goldman Sherman. She says, can China talk a bit about how the Kansas City Art Institute influenced her on her path? My eccentric uncle was Lester Goldman, and I'd love to hear if he was an influence.
I came to art school late, and there were a lot of teachers who were my age, and Lester was one of them. And it was a wonderful experience for me. It took me from being, you know, a lot of kids who go to art school are the ones who made the murals when other people were studying history. I wasn't that kid. I always drew. I was never interested in product. I was never interested in the product. I was only interested in the process. So I was always drawing, and I didn't really care what it looked like. On a certain level, I really didn't care what it looked like. So I go to an art school, and most of the kids are the art stars, and I'm not. But you know, it didn't make any difference. Someone said to me, I know you've just started, but you have a quality of line of somebody who's been drawing for years. Well, in a way I had, but the Art Institute made me into an artist. And they weren't fussy. So I proved myself in the foundation, and I took a half a year of foundation where it was endless problem solving in a visual way. And I could do it. I could do it well. And I became part of a group of people from all the departments who would go to bars at night and argue art. And we all had keys to the studio, and I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I left at 11 o'clock at night. It was just the most intoxicating time for me. You know, by the time I was a junior, I was ready to leave. I'd learned so much, but I stuck it out and I got my degree.
Here's a nice comment from Donna Shank Hamlin. She says, I like the way you make me tilt upside down to see figures that look familiar from art history, East and Western. The effect is lively, spinning a little to find all these illusions. I also really like your pink and blue that remind me of dishes from an older time. This is a lot of fun to look at.
Oh, I'm glad. I want people to have a good time.
Well, maybe you could tell us more about your fabric sources. And you know how you have this material that sort of references an older time or art history.
Well, I get fabric in different ways. One is whenever I travel to another city, I look for fabric. So I'm always looking for possibilities. There are online sources now as well. And then people whose parents have passed will invite me to come to the apartment and look through the closets, and they'll pull things out of drawers. And I sometimes get things that way. And I had a show in Concord, New Hampshire. And afterwards, someone mailed me something beautiful and asked me to let me know when I used it, and enclosed her address, which I've lost. But I also haven't used the lace yet. It's sort of a kind of lace. So I'm safe, and maybe I'll find the address.
How about your other materials? So earlier.
The tapestry.
Threads
and trim and buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally a small bronze casting from the time when I was a sculptor. There are no rules. I just, and the thing I wanted to tell you was, I don't just make art about animal people combinations and sort of kid stories sort of stuff. I do all kinds. I just recently finished a drawing of a robot running for Congress. And he's giving this big speech. but there are only two people there and they aren't listening very hard. But there's a little animal in front who is listening to every word.
That is a good segue. I had a question relating to how much the content of your work is related to current events. I see. I mean, I'm imagining. I project some of that into your more recent work. But why don't you tell me what's going on?
In all kinds of ways. First of all, I'm always trying to make sense of the world. In all its glory and horror and absurdity, the workers and the slugs, the prophets and the sleepwalkers, and who's in charge and who suffers because of that. And why we forget that we are animals too. But there's all of that, but there's also so much out there to make sense of that. Recently, I sort of hesitate to say this, but the last drawing I finished showed a man and a woman in the front. He was only partial part of his figure, but enough to read. And he was in the back and she was in the front. And they were looking up in the sky, and this, not exactly a bird, more like a bird folk. So he's half person, half bird, kind of. And plummeting through the sky. And the man says, "That's the third one this week." And the woman says, "You're next."
Very dark.
Very dark.
Yeah.
So some of them are dark. Not all of them, though.
Well, we were talking about the border and at least one of them being like night. And so I have a couple questions here that relate to the size of your works and the edges, your treatment of the edges, so that they could be related. Can you talk, from Emma Golden Sherman again, can you talk about the edges of the work and the lack of rules that you mentioned? I mean, how do you train to hear impulses and trust them, she asks.
I just give myself over to the process. I just work here. I'm in the grip of something that's larger than I am. I don't think it's the devil. I think it's something else. And because I feel so well, but maybe that's what the devil does. Anyway, so I just give myself over. I'm completely, the drawing I just finished started out with 3 figures. It ended up with 1, and that figure changed. And then the ground changed it. And then I started to work on the text for that drawing, and the text changed while I was doing the drawing. I don't feel exactly responsible for that. There are no rules.
This is continuing that. When you create your characters, Eileen Wong notes there are hybrid beings, as you've said, and often.
Variously hybrid.
Please elaborate on what that means to you when you make that choice to do that.
Well, they're already one thing, and my job is to turn them into something else. And that's one way to do it. A certain number of my drawings these days, since 2014, I found a reliable source of tapestry copies of classic paintings from the 14th through the 20th century. And I get them, they're fabric already, and then I collage and sew into those and change them, sometimes drastically. I did one recently. It was a small Caravaggio painting of boy musicians. And I changed it into a high concept art band called Derek and His Darlings. And maybe the thing I liked best was a figure I added afterwards. in addition to Derek, Derek ended up playing the amplified. Oh, and they were being interviewed backstage. And Derek played amplified lute and violin, and the other two boys sang harmony and played percussion. But then there was a little guy with candy eyes who sang falsetto, and he's maybe my favorite person. And that's the part I made all by myself.
Well, this has
And
been
you know I have a good time.
yes, you do. We've been having a good time. You have such an imagination, and your work is beautiful. Thank you so much for being here to talk about one of them, but also give us a sort of bigger context in terms of your ideas and your technique and your career and how it flowed. Let me ask people to please put comments into the Q&A box if they have them. And I want to thank Jennifer Harlan and John Murray for their assistance with this program.
I want to thank you, Liz, for asking me.
You're very welcome, and thank you again for coming this evening to talk to us. So have a good evening, everyone, and take care.
Thank you.